it's something to keep working at, but it, and there'll be times, even if you're experienced with it, what, you want the mic? I will do that.
No, I don't think you have to, but if you...
I don't know what it sounds like. So, what was...
Perfect.
What was I saying?
It takes time.
Right.
Working on it constantly.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember. So,
It takes time with the readings, even though you've been around it.
yeah, so even though I've been around it a while, and there'll be times where I feel like, oh, I'm getting a clue here. And then a little later, I go, no, I'm not. I'm wrong about that clue, but that's probably not true. We get little, what would you call it?
Glimmers? Moments.
Yeah, and just the slightest, kind of layer of obscuration gets kind of cleaned up, sort of, Have you ever tried to clean a really, really, really dirty tub or, enamel or, where the first time you scrub it, it's like nothing comes off at all, and then like the 18th time, it's like you finally get to the enamel part, and it's such a good feeling. But it's kind of like that. We are so obscured from being able to see reality as it actually is, and it's such a strong habit that being able to, lift whatever's blocking us from being able to experience things as they are, is really in there. I mean, it's like I said, like you scrub lots and lots and lots, and nothing seems to get better, but it is. There's something getting undermined. So it's just the dirt of our mind. And it's not, so I was telling Peggy, one of the challenges, and I probably said this last week, one of the real challenges to me on this subject is that dependent arising is easy to get. We all get that everything, that causes and conditions, that the apple seed won't grow into an apple tree if all the conditions aren't met. We get that. But the consequence of understanding what it means to be dependent arisings, that everything that exists is a dependent arising, really understanding the consequences of that statement is very subtle. And it's very hard to get. So it's kind of that base, it's like, why is that? One side of the coin's easy to get, why is the other side of the coin so difficult to get? But it's just because of our ignorance, the way things appear to us is absolutely as inherently existing. And even though we intellectually get that things are dependent, they're dependent arising, that doesn't actually counter the way things appear to us. Even Aryas who've had a realization of emptiness, have seen emptiness directly, the appearances still appear inherently existent. They don't fall for it at all. They know that's not true, but it still appears that way. That's how strong of a habit it is. Only Buddhists don't have that experience. So, but they used to before they were Buddhists. So, all right. Does anybody have any specific questions from the reading or from the meditation or anything? Okay.
Can you please send them to me?
Oh, you weren't.
Right, I was in hand loss.
Okay. And you didn't get them. Of course, I can't just send them because I have to acknowledge on my phone that it's not someone breaking into my account. This is my way of thinking.
That's the way everything is going, this two-part authentication.
Yeah, so that's why I'm trying not to fight it. But, I have no confidence. Said yes. Boy, that was slow. Okay. I am really stalling. I just can think of so many things I can stall to do here.
Oh, take 30.
I have a question
That
about
line was
Sunday.
empty.
I have a question about Sunday.
Okay.
What I thought, is the mind you?
Oh, that's a good question. Is the mind you? Okay. Short answer, no. But this is how we discover what the I is. It's through this kind of process. So, are you thinking of Venerable Robina's example of an activity? You know, what are you thinking of?
I'm thinking that, this body is going to end.
Yep.
This is who I think I am, this body.
Mhm.
But really and truly,
Really and truly,
I'm not, my mind is not this body. So that's why I ask. Is the mind that continues on and takes on another form, that's not me.
okay, we're going to talk about all of that. Okay, so last week we kind of looked into dependent arising. What did it mean that things are dependent arising? So we all know that it's, that if something is a dependent arising, it means it's dependent on causes and conditions, like the apple seed and the apple tree, Other ways things are dependent are, they can be dependent on parts. So a cup is dependent on its sides, on the bottom, So there's also, I keep hitting the thing, not supposed to do, that's what I do. Oh, great. Okay.
There.
Okay. Another way things are dependent is that they depend upon language and conception. So basically, cup does not exist unless a mind conceives cup. And then what we mean by something that is that this is conventionally a cup is that, this is how it's known. This is a cup. We all agree that this is a cup. And that's all it means. This is what we're talking about depending on language and conception. Is this, it literally, cup cannot exist until a mind conceives cup. And the basis of designation of cup exists before a mind conceives cup.
We ask if it exists before we label it cup.
Are you sure?
It exists. It's, yes, it exists, but we haven't
But there's no
labeled.
cup, is there?
No.
Cup's just a name.
It's merely labeled.
It's
on
merely
the
labeled
green.
cup. So like when you invent something brand new, like I like to use the example of Post-it notes, but now those have been around too long. We don't even need
Need them.
Post-it notes. Why? Because we have smartphones. So let's take the smartphone. You know, before phones were smart, did they exist? Yes, they did. But the smartphone didn't exist. You know, somebody had to come up with that moniker. And then we had to agree by convention that it's a smartphone. If that name hadn't taken off, hadn't become part of our language, we would have all long forgotten it. Nobody would remember that's what, you know, somebody decided to try to market it as, you know, a smartphone. So, but the phone, yeah,
So what you have on the screen, does the comma represent and?
yes. Well, no, actually it doesn't. It's sort of an and or,
And or?
yes. So, a cup is dependent upon causes, and it's dependent upon its parts, and it's dependent upon language and conception.
But are there other examples where only one or two of these apply?
Yes.
Like,
Emptiness. Emptiness does not depend upon causes because it is not a product, it is permanent. So the emptiness of a cup exists in every moment of the cup. The emptiness of the cup depends upon its parts. The emptiness of a cup depends upon language and conception. But the emptiness of the cup is not produced by the cup. Emptiness is a description of an aspect of the cup. Its true nature, actually. The absence of inherent existence isn't being produced. In fact, nothing could be produced unless the absence of inherent existence existed. I know, it just makes you hurt, doesn't it? It makes my teeth hurt. You know, it's just, you know, but you think about it. Okay, I'll give another example, because there are only a couple of things, there are three things that are permanent, I think. One of them is unobstructed space, or uncompounded space. What does that mean?
Space was I remember this from the get-go.
Do you remember what it means? What does uncompounded space mean?
Uncompounded space means that it's empty of causes.
No.
Or it's the one that is.
The definition of uncompounded space, it means the absence of obstructive contact. I know.
So is
Okay,
that, is
what-
that the same as absence of causes and
No.
conditions?
Okay, so wait.
Yeah, okay, say that again, so
It's an absence of obstructive contact. Okay. Everything that exists can be here because of space. If there was no unobstructed space, nothing could be built because there'd be no space for it. So it's not the same as what we mean when we use the word space. You know, like I would say I'm taking up space. And uncompounded space means you can't take it up. You couldn't exist if there wasn't space for you. So that's the kind of space we're talking about here. So the whole universe, the Big Bang, could not occur if there was no space for it to occur in. Okay? So it's an absence of something. It's an absence of anything in the way you know, of something being there, so to speak.
Is there a permanent space?
It is permanent. Uncompounded space is permanent.
Oh, okay, so uncompounded space is permanent.
So look at all those words, Mamo. Uncompounded means
There's no-
it's not a compound, which means it's not made up of parts, which, you know, it's not produced. Compounded things are produced, they're products. Uncompounded things generally are absences. You know, emptiness is an absence of inherent existence.
So is there
Space is an absence of obstructive contact.
So is there, and I have to look at my notes because I remember this from before, because my
Okay,
heart,
get to it.
is there an impermanent space?
No, that's not what space is. Uncompounded space. So let's not go off into
Okay.
science. We're
Yeah,
talking
no, this
about
one's
terms
good.
here, okay? So,
So is it like this space here? It doesn't have anything that
No.
you could go into
no,
that space.
I'm in space.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with what we call nothing there. This table couldn't be here if there wasn't space here.
Well, that's the best way to explain it then.
You know, I couldn't sit here if there wasn't space for it. That space is referred to as uncompounded space. It is permanent. Uncompounded space is permanent, not outer space. Outer space, for all I know, was produced by the Big Bang.
So can uncompounded space be occupied
Yeah,
by anything and anyone?
by everything and
Right.
everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah, but we can't fill it, which is really interesting. You know, the universe is expanding. It couldn't expand if there wasn't uncompounded space. Because all it means is an absence of obstruction. There's nothing there to block it. That's all it means.
Okay.
It's not fancy.
Okay.
It just sounds really ridiculous.
Okay.
So it is permanent. Permanent means unchanging. Doesn't mean eternal, because the emptiness of the cup ceases when there's no cup. It's not produced by the cup. It's part of the cup. It's the ultimate truth of the cup. It's the way the cup actually exists.
But unchanging while it is in existence.
No,
No, it's a space that's.
both of them are permanent. Uncompounded space, I know this is hard. Uncompounded space, and you may not get it. I mean, this takes a long time to kind of get I mean, it really does kind of give me the heebie-jeebies, you know, because the words sound easy. But accepting the consequence of the words, well, I mean, I've been listening to it for a long, long time, you know? So, okay. So it's an absence of something. It is not produced by the cup. The cup actually couldn't exist if it existed inherently. That is part of trying to understand how things exist. Because inherent existence is actually impossible. But we think things appear that way. The way we function is through this mistaken idea that things exist inherently, by their nature, from their own side. There is at some point where we feel like, you know, so you see a whole bunch of cups on the store shelves, you know, but then you pick one out and it becomes your cup because you're going to buy that cup. Now it becomes something more to us. It's like, you know, when you first see them all, they're just cups. They're merely cups. You know, we have a name for them because we learned the name for them, you know, all that kind of stuff. But in like the second moment, even before we pick one out, you know, they become cup. We lose sight of its dependent arising. You know, it is cup. I mean, this is how we think. And then it becomes my cup.
Mhm.
And then if somebody, goes off with your shopping cart because they've mistaken their shopping cart for yours, you go, wait a minute, that's my cart. With my stuff in it. Now, the fact that you haven't paid for it yet doesn't change that view. Because this is what we do. We label it and then we grasp it. So as soon as we pick it out, it's now my cup. Or whoever you're buying it for. It's little Johnny's sippy cup. And if you take it home and little Betsy decides it's her cup, then maybe it's no longer little Johnny's sippy cup. So, okay, they're quiet now. So let's shake this off a minute. And let's kind of go within for a minute so we can set a positive motivation.
I like this.
So just take a moment to sit up straight, kind of gently close your eyes. And really bring your attention to your body sitting here. And just kind of scan the body. If any place feels tight, just allow your breath to relax it. Take a moment to remember why you came this evening, and using that reason, try to generate a positive intention to use your time well. And combine it with the wish that it be of benefit. Not only for yourself, but that it ripples out to benefit others. Now just in your mind, ask yourself what you're doing. And then ask yourself why you think that way. Like you might think, I'm sitting, or I'm thinking. What's the reason you say, I'm sitting, I'm thinking? What's doing the sitting? What's doing the thinking? Is your body doing the sitting? When your body came into the room, what propelled it to sit? Was that the mind? If you allow your body to just disappear into space, like all your molecules, atoms just disperse, getting further and further away. Then your mind disperses. Is the eye still here? Where is the eye? The mind and body aren't here. Scientists tell us that everything, our bodies, arise and disintegrates moment to moment. Because all the particles, atoms, the electrons, the neutrinos, the bacteria, everything is arising and disintegrating. The briefest of moments. Where is the I in between those moments? What needs to be present for your I to be present? mother is sitting here. And just gently open your eyes. So when we're looking for the eye, what is the basis of designation of the eye? What is the basis for the eye? Love. What is the basis of designation for the eye?
The basis of the desert is merely label.
What's the basis for the eye? What is the eye labeled upon? Peggy?
Is it the physical?
Is it?
No.
Grasping.
When you say eye,
Grasping.
what are you thinking of?
Mind, me.
What do you, but what?
This body.
This body? Is that all?
No,
The
this
mind.
mind.
And this mind?
Therein lies my puzzle.
Is that the ego also?
That's not the basis of designation. It's
Yes,
the
it is.
Isn't it the cognizer? The cognitive.
No. It's the aggregates. And the simple way of looking at the aggregates is body and mind. There are 5 aggregates, but 4 of them are mind. And 1 is body, is form. Okay. So, this is what distinguishes us from the table. The table's just form. There's no consciousness. So it's the body and mind. So I is a label on body and mind. I also have the label Tendron. I also have the label Leslie. I also have the label LK. You know, you. I have that label.
But isn't anything a person that has a mind?
Yep. That's what a person is.
Right.
Yep.
No, I
it's
don't mean a human being, but anything that I was taught.
Any living being with a
Any
mind.
living being. So that's why I get confused when you say like, as a
That's
human being, what we designate.
Now, we're talking about the eye level. The eye is, the basis of designation on the, of the eye is a body and mind. You know, you have one, 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 and mosquito has one. Because it's a sentient being with a, you know, it's a sentient being, which means it has a mind. It's a living thing with a mind. And one day we might find out that plants have minds. Right now we don't think so. But that can change. So, but the idea is that we're not, the eye is not just the mind. It is the label we give to a body and mind, to the collection of our aggregates. Okay? And that's all it is. It's not more than that. But what we do out of habit is we grasp at that eye and make it as if it's self-existent, that it's something independent of that body and mind. As if there's an eye over here, you know, telling this body and mind what to do. But what actually tells the body what to do? The mind. The mind has an urge, and the body fulfills it because of all of its abilities. This is what's so cool about the human mind. It's pretty sophisticated. And actually, all sentient beings, one of the cool things about having a mind at all, I mean, the way we define life with the mind, is sentience, is the fact that we can tell our bodies to move from place to place. You know, we have locomotion. So we have a fairly sophisticated ability, you know, both the brain and the central nervous system, our bodies are sophisticated, our mind is sophisticated, so we can be very precise in our actions, you know. It's like if we think, you know, I don't know, when we think something, I can now understand why they're always referring to the same object. It's hard to think of, you know, you just have to keep pointing to the same object. So we're back to the cup. So, you know, it's not just that you think, you know, I'm gonna pick up my cup. You know, we have a very specific thing we're looking for. You know, now when we're searching around for any cup, you know, like you open your kitchen cabinet, you know. But we're capable of, you know, the mind, the state of mind called discrimination is able to tell one object from another. You know, it's called recognition or discrimination. We have a feeling about things, you know. So we like our, you know, my cup. I like my cup. You know, or I hate my cup. Whatever. It's an unpleasant cup. I like the smooth side of my cup. So we have, you know, so we have this, we start with these ridiculous stories about whatever object we're holding in our minds, not just holding with our hands. But every moment of mind has an object of that moment of mind. So whether you're thinking about a cup, or your partner, or, you know, wondering if you remember to brush your teeth, whatever. That thought as an object. When you're grasping an eye, the object is an inherently existent eye, independent, from its own side, me.
So does that have anything to do with ego?
Well, that's how our, you know, we could pretty much use ego and self-grasping sort of interchangeably. We get into trouble if we start looking at the Western psychology definitions. It might not actually always line up exactly. Because Western psychology, you want a sense of self that sometimes borders on the grasping self. So, what you thinking, Lamo? You're working hard.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like, I mean of this teaching from many,
Well,
many.
you'll have to just look that up.
No, you asked me what I was thinking. I was
Yep.
trying to ask a question that might be simple, but I don't think this topic,
Okay, we'll wait until you're ready. So this idea of looking at what does it mean to say something is merely a label? Yeah.
I have favor. Can you explain me simple what does this mean inheritance exists?
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
for everybody it's probably obvious. I tried to translate and doesn't fit me.
No,
with this
you have to
logic.
kind of look at what
Yes. This
what isn't it in order to get it, because it's the label we've given to the idea of something existing by way of its characteristics. So you could say that this cup exists by way of its stainless steel sides, the plastic top, that that it's independent.
But just the phrase, what? How,
That's what I'm telling you.
Okay, this doesn't fit. at
It
all.
means it exists by its nature.
Okay.
Then you have to define nature.
Okay.
What does that mean? Well, depends. You know? And this is our problem. What Buddhism is trying to say is nothing exists that way. It's just all a series of dependent arisings. You know? So anything that's produced, you know, if you tried to trace back the beginning of this cup, what would you find?
Raw materials,
And before that?
mining.
Space. Space.
Atoms, space particles. You'd find this, you know, matter in some form. You would never find the beginning of the cup.
Mm.
Because the cup's just the label for the way it exists, you know, now. Its function now.
So there's no such thing as cupness.
Yes, there's no such thing as cupness. There's no such thing as tenderness. There's no such thing as I-ness.
There's no such thing as tenderness, did you say?
That's my name.
Oh,
Tendron.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I know. It gets really confusing. Sorry about that. There's no such thing as Leslie-ness.
So everything is just made up. This is really nothing.
Wrong. That's going too
Right, that's
far.
nihilistic.
No.
Because something exists. If you beat this on your head, it's gonna hurt.
Mm.
Oh, no,
So, but I got
Okay.
a question.
no.
So,
Uncompounded
therefore,
space.
the question would be, it would be only the omniscient mind.
Omniscient mind.
That's my
Yeah,
good
okay.
accent.
Right.
Okay, that would not have a, when you asked me the question before, what is the designation of
The
mind
basis of
the-
designation
No,
of I.
Of I. Only the omniscient mind would not need a basis of designation. Would that be correct?
No.
Why?
Because an Arya being who's realized emptiness doesn't need that either. We don't need it either. We just think we do.
No, but I mean, no, but from what the explanation, Arya being, which of God, okay, they still have grasping
No.
to,
They still have the appearance of inherent existence. They do not have grasping anymore.
but they're not Buddhas, they're not completely omniscient.
They're not omniscient. That's not an obstacle to omniscience. That's an obstacle to liberation. Our ignorance of self-grasping is an obstacle to liberation.
Okay.
They're not able to, in other words, a Buddha mind, this is kind of, don't worry if this makes no sense to you at all. But a Buddha mind no longer sees things. There's nothing that appears to a Buddha as inherently existent. The only reason a Buddha knows the appearance of inherent existence is through us, for ordinary beings. Because a Buddha knows our minds, a Buddha knows what we conceive. But for a Buddha, the Buddha experiences everything directly. There's no appearance of inherent existence. That's not the same thing. It's not having, the basis of Buddha, an Arya Buddha still has a basis of designation of I. It's not unreasonable for a Buddha when he's giving teachings to bodhisattvas to say, I. He's just not grasping at an I. But it's just a label for a body and mind. A Buddha has a body and mind. A super emanation body of a Buddha, an Arya Buddha, has a body and mind and can say I, because that's conventionally how it's known. So don't get confused by, just because you realize emptiness doesn't mean if you're talking to ordinary beings who haven't realized emptiness that you can't use the same language in order to communicate. Now, a Buddha doesn't need a super emanation body if there are no sentient beings left. Buddhas aren't sentient beings because they don't have contaminated minds. So if everybody's a Buddha, there's no longer any need to have Shakyamuni Buddha manifest and teach us with our ordinary language, our own language, because there's nobody who's suffering from ignorance. Because we wouldn't exist like this. We wouldn't have this gross physical form. Our minds would pervade everything. There'd be no ignorance.
Would that be considered the mind-only view?
No. Just want to be clear. No. No. That's what omniscient mind means. Omniscient minds are not stuck in samsara. Samsara looks like this because we grasp it an I. We grasp it an I so tightly, to me, this is just an easy way for me to think about it, is, our universe is expanding. So our false sense of separation to each other is getting so immense that we're actually expanding our whole universe. So the space between planets is getting bigger. This is from grasping at these cells. know? If we could see matter as it is, we wouldn't see all these gross, tangible, we'd see all the atoms changing place, all the electrons, neutrons, and all those neutrinos that apparently come from the sun and are just coming through us all the time. I mean, look.
So it's like looking out at space.
Like,
To look at to think of an example of what it would be like.
no, I don't think we can know what it's like. I really don't.
But that's what we're busy trying to figure out.
No, we're trying to figure out how we exist. And when we have a direct perception of it, we will experience that.
So until that time, we just
Until you have a realization of emptiness, because of our grasping, I don't think we really have a clue what that experience is like. Now, you don't have to have a direct experience, you have to have a direct experience to know what the direct experience is. However, before you have a direct experience, you have an unshakable, valid, inferential cognition of emptiness. That's what you need in order to have the power of the mind to actually have a direct experience of it. But, so then you kind of, I don't know what, I haven't had one, so I have no clue. It's sort of that simple. No clue.
So one of the things you have to really have use the word unshakable of faith.
No, it's not faith, it's reasons. It's meditating, really thinking about, okay, what does it mean to inherently exist, Well, it means it would have to be independent. Because it would mean that it has cup-ness. So it means that it wouldn't have to be produced, it would just exist that way. Nobody would have to make it. This part is really rather straightforward, okay? The problem is we don't recognize that we actually think it exists independently. Not when we're just using it, but if we, like when it breaks, there's a part of us that cannot believe this cup, which has cupness coming from the side of it, and it's my cup, could possibly not exist anymore. That moment when I can't believe I just dropped my cup. It's no longer a cup. Now that takes a long time for a stainless steel cup. Yeah.
Is that what is meant by the glass is already broken?
If the glass is already broken, no, I don't think so. I'm not quite sure. But you can, if it means that the birth of this cup and the non-existence of this cup come into being at the same time. That we would say.
Do that again?
I'm not sure I can. Okay, so it's much easier with a non-inanimate object. Okay, so we'll start with a person. So, the moment a mosquito is born, there will be a death of a mosquito. Death requires birth. Okay, so the moment that the cup comes into existence, the cessation of the cup also comes into existence.
So again, that said, does that speak to the point, or does the point of, or the saying of the glass is already broken speak to that theme?
I don't know, because I don't think, because it's not broken. It exists as a functional cup right now. It will end. It's impermanent. We don't know when it will end. Yeah, well,
Yeah, I was listening to, the first time the Dalai Lama spoke on the Four Noble Truths, Robert Thurman, with, I don't know any of you know, he's.
Oh, just get on with it.
Okay, and what he described before the Dalai Lama onto this subject was, he said, let's look at a table. And he says, if we put our books on it, we would all agree in the English language, we'll go, that's a table. And then he says, if we shove all the books all off of it, and someone sits on it, can we say he's sitting on a table, or does he say, I'm sitting on a chair? Okay. Then he says, if you cut the legs half down, does then it become
Okay,
a
but that's sort of getting ahead of the game.
Well, it's
Because
the same premise, because then
it's all relevant. It's just that it isn't just labeling. It isn't just that we can call this whatever we want. We can, but once by convention it's known as a cup, then that's what we mean by conventionally it's a cup. Same with the table. So it's true that we can sit on a table and it changes the function of the table, but most of us would say you're sitting on a table. Part of that is because we think there's tableness there, okay? That it's from its own side, it's a table. No, that's part of our grasping at phenomena. Now, you know how they make, like you go to the Museum of Modern Art and then you have all these strange pieces of furniture, like ones that look like hands, that's a chair, things like that. So, say you're a child, exploring the Museum of Modern Art, and, you might not, as a child, you may not be able to see it's an artistic interpretation of a chair because it's just too confusing, But I think that the fact that the table's non-existence exists because the table exists, like the glass is broken, okay, doesn't mean that the table doesn't exist. The table does exist.
I just wanted to say the last line. The last line was that, to explain that, he says, and if we took a match and burned, he went to step by step, he said there'd be a pile of ash, so where is the table?
Yeah, and I'm not getting
Yeah,
there.
that was.
Yeah, but the point, that's a different point.
That's a different.
Yes. So, it's a different point. It's all part of the same subject. But the fact that a table can be burned to ash, so the table no longer exists, doesn't mean the table didn't exist. So the table does exist, but it's impermanent. It won't always exist.
It doesn't exist the way we think it exists.
Right, we think it exists. As soon as
In
that
that
table
shape,
comes
yeah.
to be, or when we first see the table, we see table, and we see it merely table, it's just a table, But in that second moment, our innate self-grasping sees it as inherently existent table. Because self-grasping can be a phenomena of a person, it just means we think that whatever it is, whatever phenomenon it is, it exists inherently. So, once we do that, all sorts of disturbing states of mind arise, or confused states of mind. So, that's why it says that ignorance is the root of psychic existence, and it's also the basis for which our disturbing emotions arise, because we're misunderstanding how things exist. Because we think things come from their own side. So like, I know who Lamo is, I know exactly what she's going to say, and if Lamo can't change from that if she inherently exists.
Because
That's what it
we
means.
perceive a fixed state
Yes, so we perceive things as if they inherently exist.
as opposed to allowing for change and impermanence.
Right, even though we know intellectually we totally get that we're impermanent, that people don't stay the same, that things break, that, you know, all that stuff, we still hold things as if they exist permanently fixed, blah, blah, blah. Not just like in every moment, but as soon as Lamo does something that I think's uncharacteristic of Lamo, I will go, I don't think that's Lamo. Because I have fixed her into a Lamo box.
But isn't that also occurring intellectually?
I'm sorry,
Isn't that also occurring in the mind? So also occurring.
it's all mind.
So you're saying, if I heard that right, that although intellectually in the mind we understand
Yep.
that everything is subject to change,
Mhm.
including people,
Mhm.
you're saying at the same time the
Not at
mind,
the same time.
not at the same time.
Right. So, when I'm not having the thought that Lamo isn't one thing, she's a series of moments of which the label Lamo exists, but I'm not thinking that. I can be thinking, oh, Lamo, I can't believe you said that. That doesn't sound like you at all. It can't be you. Are you under the influence? So, you see what I mean? So it isn't that, they're both states of mind. One is on the right track, but the other is actually how we apprehend things. We actually apprehend things because that's how they appear to us, you know? Now, this is what I'm saying, intellectually, we get this. We get it's wrong, but that's not how we behave. And we know these things like when we're shocked that something breaks. If we understand that everything's impermanent, why are we ever shocked? And why are we shocked when things died? Because, I mean, you know, intellectually we know they're impermanent.
So why are we?
We're attached to it.
Because we're grasping. And what is the root of that? What is, you know, is that first grasping at this I? Well, we want to be permanent. You know? The good news is, the Buddha said, we don't cease. The mind, and it's the body it rides upon, so to speak, has existed since beginningless time. And it will continue to exist till beginningless end. And it makes it, that, you know, in other words, consciousness doesn't cease. Physicality doesn't cease. How that all works changes. So like, in this life I created the cause to be born a human being. Now, that I, that I'm saying created the cause, that was
That's
interesting.
uncharacteristic of that
The
computer.
computer came on. I promise I didn't have anything to do with that. Maybe it was doing
Updating.
A reboot?
updating. So,
It's getting eerie in here.
isn't that fascinating? But you see, this is the thing. We think, wait a minute, it's off. Well, apparently we were wrong. So anyway, but so this is the thing, is that this is what we call innate self-grasping. This is our ignorance. And until we remove it, that's how we function, is with this ignorance or dysfunction, you know.
When you say this is how we function,
We function from a point of view that thinks things exist inherently. Even though intellectually, if we talk about it, we know that's not true.
We know that we are going to cease to exist.
No,
At
we're
this
not going to
point.
cease to exist. This
In
is
this-
what's
no,
so
okay.
interesting.
The body, this body,
Pani will cease to exist.
right.
Because
But-
Pani never existed beyond being a label for this body and mind. But the mind,
The mind
stays,
is continuing.
and it
into
came
another
from someplace.
That's why I was asking the question.
It's a physical, but the mind doesn't ever be. You would think I knew how to speak English, but I really just can't get there. The mind doesn't change form. It is formless. It is non-physical. So a mosquito's mind is the same mind that that mental continuum had when it was a person,
Mhm.
like a human being person. So,
But now, isn't what I do gonna affect how that mind continues on? It's going to continue on.
it's, okay. Again, you're fixing the future mind. Yes, future moments of mind are dependent arisings. So our habits of mind, if we change our habits of mind, that's gonna affect our future moments of mind. Now what we experience is also the result of our past body, speech, and mind. So what does that say about our world?
It's never done.
I couldn't hear that.
It's never done.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Oh, no.
Okay. I think it's a simple question with not an easy answer.
Undoubtedly.
So, when we go moments of mind,
Right.
okay, from a different school of teaching, I heard that I don't agree with this, that enlightenment is in between those moments of the mind.
That
Now-
doesn't even make any sense.
Okay, thank you. So my question is that when and if you reach a state of dharmakaya, like the Buddhist mind, the omniscient
When you
mind,
achieve Buddhahood.
when you achieve Buddhahood, there wouldn't be even moments of mind, it'd all be fluid, would it?
No.
Why not?
Because the Buddha's mind is impermanent, it's a dependent arising. It's just no longer has any ignorance at all. So there's no chance for
So,
imperfections to arise because there's no foundation for it.
It's just a mind without any obscuration.
Right.
So why would there, so,
Because it's an impermanent, because minds are impermanent.
correct, so, since there's no form, I mean,
Our mind now doesn't have any form.
Right, so, why would it have moments then?
Because it's momentary. The mind is an impermanent existence. It arises moment to moment. It is impermanent. Even a Buddha's mind is impermanent.
So the Buddha's mind has to have, basically, then you're saying, a cause.
Yeah, the
To
previous
create-
moment of mind.
but it just sees, it's just perfect. What we're gonna label perfect. It
It's
doesn't
perfect
have
because it has no ignorance.
Right.
It doesn't
It
create the
sees it-
cause to live in cyclic
It
existence.
sees the true reality of it.
No more than that.
More than
An Arya who's liberated also experiences reality as it is, not moment to moment, but whenever it's in meditative equipoise on emptiness. So think about that. So even a Buddha's mind is impermanent, arises moment to moment. In every moment of a Buddha mind, it knows everything that exists. There's no ignorance.
But don't we talk about with a Buddha mind, there is no birth, there is no death?
Yeah, because there isn't, because they're
So
not in
would that
cyclic
be
existence.
A moment be a birth and a
I mean,
moment.
you can look at it that way, but it's, when they're talking about that, they're talking about samsara, birth and death. That's what it's about, because it's only in samsara that we have dualistic terms like birth and death. There's no dualism as a Buddha. Buddha just experienced existence. The mind exists, physicality exists. There's no birth and death in samsara because it's not a samsaric mind. We're the ones trapped in a cycle of birth and death. But everything is still impermanent. The thing to remember about realizing emptiness is nothing changes. It isn't that suddenly the way we exist changes. No. We've always existed the way we exist. What changes is that the misconception we have of how we exist stops. Nothing else changes. We have nothing to fear. We still exist. We just understand how we exist. That's the, so this fear of annihilation comes from our ignorance. That's part of the dualism that makes us grasp at a self, because we really think we can stop existing. That's what self-preservation, that habit, is from this self-grasping. When in fact, we can't cease to exist. So we might as well get out of samsara, because this is no fun.
So there is no self-preservation, that's a myth.
No, it's not a myth. It's our ignorance in operation. We really believe that we can be annihilated. And we grasp at this eye. And we'll shoot other people who look like they might threaten this eye, when there's nothing to protect. Because the eye we're trying to protect never existed at all. This is where it gets really hard. Because we really believe that we couldn't exist if we didn't exist inherently. As opposed to just moment to moment, dependent arising.
And how did we get there?
We've always been there. Until we get out of there, we've just always been there. This is the mistake. This is like the primordial mistake. As soon as we conceive self, we conceive other. And that
What was that?
dualism,
Say that again?
as soon as we conceive self, we conceive other. And that dualism causes the problems.
That sense of separation.
Well, it's a sense of separation. It's a false sense of separation. It's like when you learn that, the difference between a human being and a tree is like 4 strands of DNA or something.
I'd rather be a tree. Tonight.
But I mean, like, I was looking at, maybe I can pull it up. Let's see.
We don't exist.
Intellectually, we're okay with saying, we don't exist like this, or we don't want that. We want to hold
Because
on.
we think we won't exist at all. And, well, that's just not
And we
true.
can't have that. We just can't have that. We
Well,
can't
we're-
exist.
We're wrong. Because we do exist. Whether we believe it or not, we're wrong. If we think that when we die, we will cease to exist, the Buddha said, we're wrong.
So all this thing that we carry on with when the person dies, what are we doing all those things?
Because we grasp it as simple. It's our ignorance.
So everybody that contributes to this,
Is stuck in samsara. That's how we're all here.
and we perpetuate it generation to generation.
Well, there is no generation to generation. You just get born again.
Which flies in the face of Western thinking,
Totally.
which makes all this tough.
Yes.
So very.
Yeah, we're up against it. But we're not alone. Even those who are raised with the idea of rebirth
Oh, really?
grasp it as self, or they wouldn't be in samsara. So, that's the thing. Everybody who's stuck in the cycle of birth and death is grasping in an eye.
And that grasping is, at its root is because we believe we will cease to exist. But if we accept that we don't,
Well, and really work at that.
then we
Work
can
at
get
the consequence of that. See, it's not so much understanding intellectually that we're dependent arisings and that there really is no I other than a label on this series of moments of existence. We have to really understand, what does it mean to say that? Because we hold our identity so close,
But
Don't
doesn't
it's-
identity change?
I'm sorry.
Identity changes also.
Right? Their identity changes moment to moment, but we don't think it does. We think it's it's like there was an identity of us as babies, and then there was an identity of us as small children, and then there's an identity of us as lesser small children, and then
Right.
as adults.
As function, as
Yeah.
functional beings.
Well, yeah, and then as an, as an older adult. And then that's why we can say things like, I'm sorry, I just can't, what do we say? I'm sorry, I can't give up chocolate, I'm just an addict, and that's just the way it is.
That's fixed state again.
It's a fixed state, not only that, it's implying I can't change, and that somehow I had nothing to do with it.
Oh, so
Right.
refusing accountability.
Yeah, I mean, so we think it's, and there isn't that there's no truth in this. It's just bigger than this. So that's my disclaimer before the fact, So my love of chocolate is the result of a habit of, how do I put this? Okay. My experience of pleasure when I eat chocolate, according to the Buddha, is the result of positive actions of body, speech, and the mind in the past. So I created the cause to experience delight while eating chocolate. Chocolate has nothing to do with that. Okay? Now, my resistance to not eat the whole box of chocolates whenever I have a box of chocolates is my habit of thinking that more is better. My habit of thinking happiness exists in that box of chocolates. All these things. And then when I think I can't give that up because I was just born that way. My father also had this thing with chocolate, which is true. He did. The Buddha would just say, you created the cause because of your previous addictive type craving type habit to be born in a family where others also had that habit, and it takes different forms, so you're kind of helping each other continue that to the point where it can be in your DNA. So now we know that people who get addicted to cigarettes have nicotine receptors in their brain. So not everybody has them, but people who get really addicted, that's why. So when we smoke, then these little things happen. Same with alcoholics. So the Buddha would just say, we created the cause to have those receptors. It's not just evolution or just, bad luck. It's because we've created the cause for this physical manifestation of addiction.
But is it we that created it, or the mind stream that?
That's the same thing. There's no more we or I than that.
It's only the mind.
So
It's just the label of some past life.
So that consciousness that continues has created this
From actions
Yes.
of body, speech, and mind in the
current
past.
experience.
And now, how do we change that? Well, we reason that, this is an unskillful activity. I can exert the control over my mind and not continue this idea that, meeting my cravings is where happiness is. And I can break that habit.
and thus create a different
Future.
yeah.
And so if
Mind
you
stream.
do, in the next life, you won't have it.
You may not.
Well, let's assume it's gonna take maybe a couple of
Eons.
eons.
Isn't it true that the point that you're making is exemplified by umpteen thousand people every single year on January 1st committing to a diet?
And not following it. That's our
But at least
samsaric
for a little
habit.
while, they make up their mind and they stick to it.
That's just proof that we have the ability.
Okay, that's the mind making a decision, and the body follows.
Yeah, but that's why the mind is everything, because the mind drives our body.
Isn't the mind also merely labeled?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like a solid.
But it
like
exists.
one. I'm not saying, guys, it's merely, it exists by merely, I mean, I'm just thinking, from Lama Zopa just always pointed out that the mind, it doesn't exist solidly, it's just that we merely
Well, it's a moment.
attach a label to it.
from moment to moment.
Yeah, well, we have to talk, I mean,
Well,
just
that's
to
right.
understand.
That's all it's
Yeah.
good for,
But
but
it's
that's
not
not
like-
what we do. We
Yeah.
don't just talk.
Right, but it's not like there's this, when you do it like this,
This is what
solidified
dependent
mind.
arising means.
Yeah.
It's impermanent.
Yeah.
It changes moment to moment, which means we can change our mind.
Mhm.
Would mean we can change our actions. Now,
That's good news, right?
yeah,
Very.
I think it gives us total power.
It's all good news, we just can't.
We just haven't put the effort. Because let's face it, how many of us also kind of don't want to do the work?
Mm.
You know, like, I really don't want to give up chocolate.
Mhm.
Even though I know I'm practicing the mind of craving and meeting that craving. So it's terrifically stupid. But there you go.
Mm.
You know, it's effortful. It's not magic.
Mhm.
We have to understand cause and effect,
Mhm.
and then we have to understand how things exist. That we aren't stuck in some permanent, demented
Misery.
existence.
So can we add another level to this?
I don't know.
Well, let's try. So we have the capacity by changing our mind, where it exercises discipline, to change our conduct, such as that chocolate thing, or any other diet for that matter. That's component one. In component two, you said we can acknowledge, and we know intellectually, that everybody changes, right?
And everything changes.
Right,
All phenomena
that
change.
everything changes, human beings change also throughout time. And yet you say we keep them in a box through our perception of what we think
We
fits.
not only do it of others, we do it to ourselves.
Okay, so we keep everybody in a box, ourselves included.
Well, it's not like every moment we do that. But when you think about how our relationships go and how we expect someone to act in a certain way because they've been acting in a certain way, and that we're actually surprised if they start to act in a different way.
So that's what I'm getting at. When you add these two levels, these two components, we can change our mind, such as is exemplified in a diet or the discipline of the mind,
Well, just because we can change our mind.
right?
Yeah.
And then we execute against that discipline. And on the other hand, let's say there is a relationship, one is making a change and the other isn't.
Yeah, we can't control other people.
Right, and then that perception on the other part is to keep that person still in a box.
And we do it too.
So it goes either way, but there is friction as a result of
Because we grasp at things to be permanent.
the way they used to be.
Permanent means there's no change. That's how we grasp. So if we're in a relationship, that usually means, not always, there was at some point that we liked the way it appeared to us. That's why we're there. Now, we all know love is blind, so we may completely have the wrong idea, and we probably do. Everybody. This is why when you lose infatuation, that can be difficult. But it's also, we're fine as long as we're getting what we want. And as soon as that changes, and the other person doesn't have to do a thing, as soon as we want something different, that person now is an object of our suffering. It's their fault. This is how we think.
Wait, what just happened here? How did that turn into blaming?
Because that's what we do. You don't blame anybody.
But wasn't there a step that was before that?
Yes, we all of a
Yes.
sudden want something different.
We change our mind.
And that person hasn't changed at all.
And so that triggers blaming.
We're not
Yeah.
satisfied now.
And
So
so,
we, instead of going, oh, I've changed, so this relationship is no longer appealing to me, and we just move on. Instead, we go through a phase usually, not everybody, of going, hey,
What happened? You didn't change with me.
well, or we don't even see it that clearly.
so instead of perceiving our change, it's more likely that we see the other who is not changing as an obstacle
We just don't find them as appealing.
because
We
they're
don't-
not changing with us.
No, but we don't have any rational explanation for
What
it.
happened to the mind?
Our
The
mind's
mind's
just full of ignorance. We're idiots most of the time.
Thank you.
But we can change that
Okay.
through study and reasoning and really looking at how things are.
Well, that's why we're here.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
Not that I've come to this realization, but intellectually I know, because I've studied this, or I've been told this,
Okay.
that the mind is changing all the time. It's not like you're making a decision to change your mind.
But you can.
No, I'm not saying you can't. Okay, you can and you can't.
Okay, now, are you talking about habit energy?
No, I'm talking about the mind itself, just like the body, just like everything else.
It's momentary.
Is momentary, changing all the time. I'm not saying we can't change our patterns, that's nothing to do with
But the only reason it changes every moment is because it's impermanent.
Mhm.
What generally drives us, why the Buddha said we are under the control of our karma and delusions, is because our habits of mind are what's driving us. So instead of looking at every situation or moment in an open kind of way and pause and go, you know, okay, which direction do I want to go? We respond with our habit energy.
Meaning reactionary.
Well, more than just reactionary, but that's sort of what it means, because instead of acting, we are reacting out of our habit.
Mm-hmm.
So even little children can have the habit of anger,
Mhm.
or the habit of greed, or the, you know, and so, you know, if they have the habit of greed and somebody wants to play with their toys, they won't share.
Mm.
Now, the parent can try to guide them in a new way, and they may learn a new habit. They may discover the joys of sharing.
Mhm.
You know, so it's totally changeable. But when we're stuck in samsara, with the Buddhist, I mean, the way the Buddha puts it is that we are out of control due to karma and delusions, and all that means is our habit energy. And then, because, and this is, since you're new, you know, but, you know, it's all involved with karma, you know, so since we're, you know, that our habit energy is creating not just our habit energy, our actions create our future experiences, you know, we keep meeting the same or similar conditions, so it's,
repeating.
yeah, so we really have to exert effort to change our habits, because we're going to keep meeting the conditions that have been triggers for those habits, because we created the cause for that. You know?
So, I understand that past actions based on karma create the current conditions we're experiencing. My question is, why do we run into the same tests or challenges?
It's not test or challenge, it's a result.
Because you
Because if you
created
keep
it.
doing those actions, if you have the
Oh, so until you change,
right, you keep experiencing the
until
results.
then,
Because nobody's
same
giving you
unfolds.
anything. It's not that the samsara is here to teach us. No, samsara is here because we're ignorant. If we remove the ignorance, we will not have this experience. But what we're experiencing are the results of our past actions. So if our actions become wise, free of ignorance, then we will be creating the causes to be liberated from samsara, to become a Buddha, to have no ignorance. So it's quite a long view. Our to-do list goes for a while.
Today.
Because,
Well, one example with this, when you said past lives, okay, I remember two different examples. One person who was studying, they said to me, Lama, oh my God, look at what your life is now, it's gonna be horrible. You must have been terrible
Well,
in
that's
your
just
past life.
ridiculous.
And so you're gonna suffer this whole life. Whereas Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when I told, he went wonderful, and in my mind, I thought both of them were nuts. You know?
Well, yeah, this is, yeah.
Like, I thought both of them were nuts
Yeah.
because
Karma's
it's
a
not like,
very
it's
complicated
not like I
subject.
purposely did this to myself, because there is no
Now
self.
you're blaming you.
No,
Yes,
that's
that's
what I mean,
right.
because there is no self.
Okay, let's not go there, because karma's a really vast subject. So, since it's past time already,
How does this happen so fast with this subject?
This thing could
I
go
thought
for
they
months.
just sat down.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's wonderful.
it's a great topic.
I love it.
This is where liberation exists.
I love it.
We can get out of samsara by understanding emptiness. So, it's really exciting.
This is
Even
my
though
only, this is the only one
my
I don't
head hurts
fidget at.
whenever I try to explain it. So, yeah, because this is what, this is the good news.
Yeah, time.
Is, if Rinpoche says we should be thinking on, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, on this every day, to really try to see when we're grasping at the eye, like when we have a near miss while we're driving and think we're about to get killed, that, oh no, that eye. We need to look at that and go, that eye is just, doesn't exist. Yes, this body can be killed, absolutely. But I'm not gonna, there's gonna be another moment of mine. Now, if we're attached to this story we've created about this eye, we're gonna have trouble letting go of that. I had a good friend who just kept saying, I'm really not ready for, because she believed in, past and future lives. She wasn't Buddhist, but she believed in past and future lives. But it's sort of like, yeah, but I kind of want to stay this person for a while longer. Because we create a story. But the beautiful thing about reality is we are not stuck. That the story is not true. The story is a fabrication.
What a fabrication it is.
We see that's one of our problems is we're very entertained.
Because we love it.
We love self-existence. And while we have self-existence, while we're loving it, we're forgetting about the horrors of cyclic existence. That's why the Buddha taught the truth of suffering. And that why meditations are about really looking at the truth of suffering. Really, is all the chocolate in the world, all the sex in the world, all the beautiful sunrises, sunset, children smiling, that exist in the world worth the tortures, the broken hearts, the grief, because we don't have to have both. It's not true. The mind of a Buddha is blissful. So it's not like you have to have suffering in order to have bliss. That's comes from ignorance. Now, it's not the bliss that we think of as bliss, because we just know samsaric pleasures and samsaric suffering. We have no clue what, the bliss of a mind that has no delusions would be. And we have a tendency to think it'd be boring. But that's because we're addicted to craving.
So the first step to this is elimination of attachment.
Oh, well, that's a pretty big first step.
But
I think
that
the first step is noticing attachment.
Okay, and
And
then
then maybe
elimination.
understanding a little bit about attachment.
Uh-huh.
It's a long process.
But elimination of attachment.
Well, first if you really want a first step, you eliminate ignorance.
Then you're way ahead of the game.
Well, they say that sharp faculty bodhisattvas realize emptiness before they realize bodhicitta. Because they need proof. They want proof. And then once they realize emptiness, they don't have to have the direct perception of emptiness, but once they realize emptiness, then they go, oh, I really can be liberated from samsara, and I can help others too.
Thinking slowly.
But it makes, I mean, it really, I find one of the toughest things about meditating on emptiness is it's not complicated. You know, you have to sit and watch your mind, you know, and kind of go, you have to, you know, just keep dissolving the storyline and, you know, seeing that, oh, yes, I'm dependent on all these parts and you're never going to find a first part or blah, 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 you know. But to really try to go, what does that mean? What does it mean to say, I is merely a label? What happened to Tendron?
So it means I can't love myself anymore because I don't exist.
You exist. You don't exist the way you think you exist.
Okay.
It's really important to quit saying, I don't exist. That's
the
nihilism.
annihilation that you.
That's
you
an
don't
extreme.
want.
What we're doing now is we have the extreme of permanence. And we don't want to just pendulum between permanence and annihilation. We do exist. It's just the story we've created around this particular lifetime and this particular body and these particular people in our lives and all that stuff. It isn't that there aren't other people in your lives and all that kind of stuff. It's just that we hold them in ourselves to be somehow independent of these causes and conditions, moment to moment. We feel like we're more than just this moment to moment. There's a me that's developing. You know?
I'm blossoming.
I'm blossoming,
Oh, that's beautiful.
but it's grasping.
Yes.
But it's how
Well, we're
I
actually
am,
trying to
right.
remove our mistaken thoughts. How we exist will not change. So we do exist. We're just mistaken about how. And that takes a long time to really, it's very subtle. Which is why people don't realize emptiness, you know, within weeks of discovering Buddhism. So.
You should start in first grade for everyone.
Well, I mean, you know, the
This is so
monks,
important.
but the monks get that, the nuns get that, who are raised in a Buddhist country and become monastics. It doesn't mean that it's not easy, because we naturally grasp at this self.
This is just out of curiosity. Being born in the West, I think, poses a different obstacle than we're thinking something different here than in India.
They're still grasping at a self. In fact, in India, because they're Hindu, they really grasp at a self. Their religion tells them it's permanent. We can't use any excuses. Everybody who's stuck in samsara is because they're grasping at a self. So it doesn't matter what culture you're in, if you're stuck in samsara, you're grasping at a self. That is the foundation, that is the root of samsara. You are liberated before you become a Buddha. So you can get out of samsara and still not be a Buddha yet. So they're, you know,
You're up on your 10th bhumi.
well, you're on the 8th bhumi, 9th bhumi, and 10th bhumi. Those are rounds, which is really just a rhyme. I'm sorry, I'm just mumbling now.
I usually say there are lots of Buddhas around. Is that a true statement? Can I say that?
You just did.
No, but I mean, would I be incorrect?
Not according to Buddhism. Why? Why are Buddhas everywhere?
Because there's some
To remind you
back.
there's another way to be.
Oh, you think that's why?
Because they are.
Makes a difference.
Mhm.
Because they are everything.
They are everything? They're you? They
And
have
that's-
no ignorance. If they have no ignorance, they have to be everywhere.
That's right.
Otherwise, they'd have ignorance. If they're not, if their mind, if the mind of Buddha mind, if the Buddha mind doesn't pervade all things, it would have ignorance. It has no ignorance.
You're not gonna hold up a sign. I'm a Buddha.
No, I told my husband that.
You think it's just neutrinos that are when we create the cause to be able to see Buddhas, you know, we will see Buddhas. I mean, it's not this, you know, we will experience the presence of Buddhas. So, anyway, my talking about emptiness just, oh my goodness. Okay, so, the next part of the reading, I think is on non-duality. And then, well, anyway, it gets harder.
It gets harder.
That's nice.
Thanks.
So don't let that stop you. I mean, and I shouldn't say it gets harder, because for some people, the use of the description of non-duality makes everything fall into place. For me, it's like, I just get stuck, yeah, we know this, long, short, you know. So it's not particularly effective for my mind. You know, I didn't create the cause to find it just go like that. So, you know, but, so just ignore the fact that I made a judgment like that. But the material gets, it's not as concise, so, anyway. Now, if you want, for those who've been studying a while, I don't recommend this just in general, because, you know, you may need to learn more about the mind and then about karma, stuff like that. But the book, How to See Yourself as You Really Are, the little practice book by His Holiness, you know, that's a tool to help you develop some concentration and then to meditate on emptiness.
Is that carried here in the bookstore?
I don't know if we may be
It's
out,
on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon.
but check the bookstore first.
Okay.
But I don't
I-
think
I
so,
don't
because I was
think we
looking
have
for it
it.
earlier. But,
Any
but
other
it presumes you know something.
titles you recommend?
Well, right now, I just recommend reading the teachings
Okay.
that come with the course.
Okay.
You know, you don't, you know, it's really can be dangerous to dive in the, you know, and overwhelm yourself, because this stuff just takes a lot of thought.
Mhm.
So understanding the words, the jargon, the whole thing, and then, because you just need to study. I mean, that's what the Rinpoche says in one of these readings, is that we need to accumulate merit, you know, remove our obstacles, accumulate merit. So that means, you know, really, I don't know, it's too late.
I would say go slow. If you
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
it takes one step at a time.
But it's wonderful every day to think about things like, you know, like when you get caught with that eye, you know, somebody yelled at you, or like I said, a near miss in traffic or something, to go, oh, that's that eye that I think exists. You know, that's that eye that I'm trying so hard to protect. And the Buddha says it doesn't exist at all. That false eye. Yeah.
I just ended with a funny story with the eye. Oh, it's
Yeah,
very,
very short.
Very short. I was in Publix last week, and there was this big thing, a thing with all water in it. So there was another woman taking the water and putting it in the thing, her cart, and the man goes, "You're taking my water," and she says, "I thought that was my water." And then he went, "Well, I already paid for it," and I went, "Well, in that case, it's my water." And it was really funny, you know, because he had to say, "I paid for it." He was just buying water.
So it's mine.
So when I heard it was paid for, I said, "That's what I tried to." Lucky you had a sense of humor. Yes.
Yes.
But it was funny. With the high water.
But you see, and that's, everybody else ignore me, but that's why the definition of stealing is when you think it's yours.
Yes.
As opposed to just borrowing or something,
Yes.
you know?
Borrowing.
Borrowing, I love
But it's interesting, they're very precise with language. Okay, how you doing back there? All right,
We're all having fun.
all right. We didn't say any prayers at the beginning, but hopefully you set a motivation. You can go ahead and turn that off. So